And so based on all your experiences, your successes, and your failures, if you were speaking to a high school or college student right now, what would you tell them to best prepare them for a career in public service?
Pick something you like and do it well and do it better than anybody else, regardless of what it is. Distinguish yourself in some activity or some academic initiative, right? Overperform, learn the discipline of keeping your word and working hard, and then keep your eye on the ball. I don't think it's what you do. I think it's how you do it.
Welcome back to 30 Years in 30 Minutes. I'm your host, Michael Oved. Terrence Gable is our producer, and we've got a great episode for you today. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you today's guest. Stephen Goldsmith is an American politician who was the 46th mayor of the 8th most populated city in America, Indianapolis, as well as the deputy mayor of New York City for operations. Professor Goldsmith is also the Derek Bach Professor of the Practice of Urban Policy and the Director of the Innovations in American Government program at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He currently directs Data Smart City Solutions, a project to highlight local government efforts to use new technologies that connect breakthroughs in the use of big data analytics with community input to reshape the relationship between government and citizens. Mayor, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
You're one of the most influential and respected mayors in America during your time in office. How did you become interested in politics and public service?
I'm not sure how applicable my answer will be to everyone else, maybe, but let me go. So I got elected president of my junior class or president of the student council in high school. And I got a letter from the then president of the school board congratulating me on my leadership position. The guy who wrote the letter then became the mayor of Indianapolis. He was chairman of the school board, became mayor of Indianapolis. And his name was Dick Lugar. He was a Phi Beta Kappa, Rhodes Scholar, committed to the public good. And so at the time, I thought mayor was probably the toughest job in America, and he got that job. And I thought, well, that's an inspiration to me. I'd like to do that as well. So that was high school and college.
And so immediately after college, or even during college, what did you do to prepare you for being mayor or for a career in public service?
Yeah, well, so you can't go to mayor's school, right? I wanted to be a mayor like in high school and maybe a freshman in college. I decided I wanted to be mayor. But, like there's no path to becoming a mayor. I mean, there's a political path, but not an educational path. So, and of course, you're never sure that I was pretty committed, but that doesn't mean I was sure I was going to make it. So I thought the best thing to do would be go to law school. I'm not sure it makes a big difference which profession you pick, but I thought that might help my analytic abilities and give me a fallback profession. So I was active again in student government in college. I went to law school and then practiced law as I began to kind of figure out how to get more active in politics.
So looking back now, if you were to pick the traits and qualities you think were most important to develop when you were younger that put you on that path to success in public service, what do you think they would be?
Well, interesting question. I'm not sure there's a right answer. And my answer comes from my own personal perspective, which is, I think there's, just to dramatically oversimplify, I think there's two categories of individuals who go into politics. One who view the election as a means to an end of service, and the others who view the election as the end, right? I'm elected, therefore I'm cool and substantial and I get to do stuff. And so, predictably, I think I'm in the former category. And so I think that the path to public service should be service, right? How do you serve others in your day-to-day activities? How do you serve others in your student posts? How do you serve others in terms of your community volunteerism? How do you serve others in terms of understanding their context and what happens? So I think the path is a combination of a service path and an analytic path, right? Which by analytic, I mean learn. This may be too much of the Harvard Kennedy School me, but learn analytics, right? Learn policy frameworks, learn what makes a difference. So I think it's both an intellectual track and a service track.
So for someone like me who's interested in pursuing public good and in public service, what do you think are the steps that I ought to take in college, after college, and in order to best prepare me?
Well, I think you're demonstrating that, right, Michael? I mean, in what you do and in what courses you take, and just this podcast shows initiative. So I think individuals can prepare themselves by the courses they take. They can prepare themselves by the leadership they undertake. But over and above that, then the question becomes kind of what are the next steps after college, after the preparation? Do you take a regular job? Do you take a community job? Do you take a job as a staffer? I'm not sure there's a right answer to those questions. I do think that whatever happens after college, absent a grad school stint, should involve community service in one way or another, right? Either as a staffer or as a volunteer.
And to that extent, do you think it'd be beneficial to take a career in the private sector after you graduate college and taking that private sector career and pivoting later on to a career of public service? Or do you think it's beneficial to go straight into public service or government?
Well, I'm not sure that there is an answer to that question, right? So if you go into the private sector and then you go into service, I mean, there's a couple ways to do this. The most common is you make a lot of money and you donate to your own campaign and you get elected to something. That is a path that feels like A, not a certain path, and B, and not a totally reassuring path for democracy, but that is a path. A second private sector path is that you would become so well respected in the way you conduct yourself in your community that you would be encouraged to run for mayor or city council or school board, which is maybe the hardest job in America, right? And so that would be a private sector path. For me, and I think maybe slightly preferable would be to, and this is what I did. So I didn't go into politics. I didn't have a strong political connection. So I became a kind of a typical corporate lawyer, but then spent half my time volunteering for community groups, right? So I would help them with their zoning issues, or I would help them with their signage issues, or fill in the blank. And so that connection to the community, when I finally figured out how I was going to go into politics, the fact that I had done both concurrently was enormously beneficial. Not only did I have relationships, I developed connections and understanding of the community that I would not have had otherwise.
And just building off that, a lot of people see politics as this career, this path only attainable by people with connections. You've clearly demonstrated that not to be the case. But speaking to people like that, what hope can they have to succeed in politics? And do you think that that's the path forward for most people without political connections? Just get involved at a really local level and then build up from there?
Well, I think it's complicated by the fact that increasingly, I'm a local politician. I do a little state and federal work, but I'm primarily a local politician. I think it's the stagnation and barriers are in large part generated by the fact we have one party cities, either Republican or Democrat. And then that gives the party apparatus too much control over the entry of well-qualified people. It doesn't eliminate it, it just makes it more difficult, right? So if you have a more competitive framework, then you have an opportunity to kind of break through. So I think that is an issue. But I have a kind of a naive at my age belief that if someone is dedicated and works hard, he or she can distinguish themselves in any situation, right? You can be the best Hill staffer, right? You can be the best person on a presidential campaign. You can be the best volunteer in the local political organization. Very few people commit to something, offer to do something as volunteers, I'm talking about now, and do it. Right. So the ability, and so I wanted to find a way through this kind of political path. So I volunteered for my local political party and did a lot of work while in the law firm, and then also did a lot of community work so that I'd be touching all the bases. So it's a long, rambling answer to say I think talent, commitment, and energy will allow anybody to distinguish themselves.
So just about committing yourself entirely to whatever you do.
Yes. I mean, it really depends whether you want to do public service, part-time as a avocation, which I guess you can do with obviously less intensity. But if you really want to be a congressperson, or you really want to be a mayor, or you really want to be a governor, or you want to be a cabinet secretary, or maybe you think you can be president, then you need to be all in, right? I mean, I think I was kind of obsessed from high school and college on. I wanted to be mayor, and so I was going to make that my college thesis to understand the political process. I was going to volunteer. I was going to do all these things, right? And I did them relentlessly, and I got a break or two, obviously, and it worked out.
And now moving on to your personal experiences and your experiences in politics. Once you decided to run, you told us that you've been wanting to run for mayor for a long time. But once you decided to run, what was the hardest part of being on the campaign trail, and how did you tackle it?
Yeah. So first of all, you can't just run I couldn't go from being a young member of a law firm to mayor without a political operation. That was impossible. So I ran for district attorney first, for a couple of reasons. One, I thought the system was reasonably inefficient and marginally corrupt, and I wanted it looked like a good reform opportunity, and I like reform. And two, at the time I ran, I was a Republican running against a Democrat who was so highly favored that no other Republican wanted the nomination because they viewed it as a waste of time, because he was just a highly esteemed guy. So now to your question, but just framed in the district attorney election as contrasted to the mayor election, I went to high schools and I recruited thousands of volunteers. And with those thousands of volunteers, we knocked on tens of thousands of doors. I walked 12 hours, 2 6-hour shifts a day for like 100 days with these teams of high school students going up and down each side of the street, knocking on doors, handing out brochures, getting people to talk to me. And, in these district attorney and mayoral elections, not a very high percentage of people vote. So I contacted a disproportionately high number of people who were going to vote. I didn't have a lot of money, but I met everybody, right? So I just thought if I just outworked everybody, I might have a chance to win. And I don't think I actually deserved to win. The other guy was a pretty good guy, but I won. And then after being district attorney and establishing my reform credentials, it was easier to kind of run against the machines as mayor.
So running for office, how much of obviously that was your first time running, but running for office, how much of the work do you actually need to get on how much of the groundwork do you have to do if you're running for office? Or is it, because a lot of people see politicians and it's very easy to say, oh, politicians, all they do is raise money. All they do is kind of sit back and legislate or attempt to legislate. You didn't just legislate. You didn't just sit back and fundraise. A lot of what you did was actually doing the groundwork. So how much of what politicians do or what politicians need to do is the groundwork and getting involved in that nitty gritty?
Well, you need to get involved in the nitty gritty to establish your bona fides, right? To establish your credentials, and you need to do it to win. But you need a lot of money depending on the size of the election to win. So you really have to do both, and you have to be able to, I actually think I was probably a little better at government than politics. I think I was lucky in politics, but I had people that were better than I was that were around me, and they helped. So I think you have to do both. You have to raise the amount of, look, if you need so much money to get elected in office, you want to raise more money than anybody else does. If you need a ground game to get elected to office, you need to have 2x the ground game of anybody else, right? You just need to recruit people who are based on your passion. You need to raise the money, and you need to invest the time and energy to do whatever it is. And it is both money and the ground game.
And being successful both at the ground game and at fundraising requires the art of persuasion. What do you think was the key that allowed you to be successful in terms of your skills at persuasion?
Right. Well, again, I think my answers are going to seem kind of simplistic based on an earlier age, but to me, what was key was a vision for what I wanted to do if elected, a very clear, coherent vision of how the city would be better if I were elected. And that was the same vision I took to motivate people at a town hall meeting. That's the same vision I took to local businesses to try to raise money, right? I mean, I did both. I did a lot of both. But it wasn't invest in me so you can get X, Y, and Z. It was, here's what a great city looks like. Or I ran for governor unsuccessfully as well, but invest in what my policies are, and I will do them if elected.
When you ran for governor, it must have been hard kind of to bounce back from the loss. How did you deal with that?
It was excruciating, not bouncing back the loss, because the polls had me at 6 points on election day. It's one thing to lose when you know you're going to lose. It's another thing to lose when you think you're going to win. It's just not an enjoyable circle. There's no way to put it politely, like, oh, well, that was okay. It wasn't. It was a huge loss at a time that my career appeared to be ascendant. And it took a little while measured in terms of weeks, not months. But I was fortunate to be reelected mayor and then immediately I was fortunate to be reelected mayor. And then I immediately ran for governor when many folks said, you can't do it that quickly because the people who just elected you won't be happy. I did. I also ran a terrible campaign, but put that aside. But then I thought, well, people had reelected me for a reason as mayor. I had 3 years left on my term. And why not go in, pick a new set of aspirations for the second term and do them with great intensity and, sustain this effort of how a city could be great and then move on from there. So it took a little bit of soul searching, but really I had the people of Indianapolis gave me an opportunity for service, right? I viewed my responsibility as executing on that mandate.
Why do you say you ran a terrible campaign?
Well, the polls said I was way ahead. I raised more money. I don't think our campaign was sharp. I had a really unpleasant primary election. I won the primary against a fellow from our party who was the state chairman, and there was a lot of ill will. And then there were some things that happened in the campaign, but basically I think because we thought we were ahead the whole campaign, we just weren't sharp enough at the time.
Next question I have is about the inevitability of failure along the way and the pathway to success. Clearly, and it's an important lesson to learn because people go into these things like politics and assume that they're not going to encounter failure along the way. What do you think the best way is to cope with that failure?
I don't think I'm very good at answering that question. I'm not sure what the best way is to cope with it. I mean, in politics, you're going to lose eventually. You're not going to always win. Let's see, 3, 4, 5. I won 5 out of 7 elections, but I lost the 2 most important. Most important measure in terms of highest. And I've had other kind of disappointments in public life as well. I've had a lot of successes that are reassuring. I mean, it really depends because there's always the ego. You're not going to be doing this if you don't have some ego, but hopefully that you're doing these efforts in order to accomplish something. So you just have to kind of step back and go, all right, did I do my best? I did my best. I mean, I've run campaigns where nothing I would have done, nothing I could have done would have made a difference. So you just have to say you did your best or not and move on. So, but it's not easy. It's not easy, really.
What did you learn are the most important qualities of a great leader?
There's a couple ways to answer this, I think. One is a clear vision of what you want to do. that is articulated, not just in the public eye, but to everybody you hire and everybody you appoint. Here's what I stand for. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what the part of it that relates to you. Here's what my campaign promises would be. I mean, every person we appointed to a board had to kind of be interrogated about, do you agree with these things? Are you going to do these things? Are you in this? Right. So that's one set of things. But I also think that, and I've worked with a lot of mayors over the years, a lot of mayors, and some are good at public speaking, some are good at management, some are good at kind of leading, some have been presidents of city council, some have been CEOs of their local companies. I think what's important for leadership is to identify what you're good at and then hire really good people to help with what you're not good at, and to recognize that just because you're elected doesn't mean you're good at everything. You're not good at everything. You're good at some things. So I think the key part of leadership is knowing why you're there and recruiting people who are better than you are.
How do you recruit people who are good people to be around you, people that will be a general value add to you? What is the key to doing that successfully?
I think you have to identify the people who are in the organization at the time you get elected, who you think are gems that have been kind of hidden away, and promote them. And then you need to recruit based on your vision. So, as mayor, I went around the city to people who had not been involved in government, who had reputations of being extraordinary at what they did: CPAs, MBAs, lawyers, sanitation workers, whatever the case may be, and tried to recruit them into my vision of what should go on. Right. So I think you can attract, particularly at the local level, really good people to do a period of service in behalf of their fellow residents and around mission, because it's not certainly around money in government. It has to be around mission.
And how did you delegate the tasks?
I'll tell you what I did, and I think Michael Bloomberg may have done it even better. But for me, I had this vision, and I wanted the people I hired to question everything. I wanted them to question me. I wanted to question the way they did business. I wanted them to use data to challenge the assumptions in the organization. But basically, I delegated broadly and only held people accountable for results. That was what Michael Bloomberg did when I went to work for him, which was to have confidence in the people you hire, trust the people you hire, but hold them accountable for results. Trust but verify.
Yeah. Do you recommend that people take a career in politics?
Sure, but not everybody. I mean, well, first of all, hold it a second. I recommend that some people consider a career in government. I don't know about a career in politics. I think after a while, politics is government that comes from political processes is good. Politics can be good. A career in politics can, I think, without the other part of service, could end up making you cynical, though. I think you need a break from that, not a career in it.
That makes sense. And so based on all your experiences, your successes, and your failures, if you were speaking to a high school or college student right now, what would you tell them to best prepare them for a career in public service?
Pick something you like and do it well, and do it better than anybody else, regardless of what it is. Distinguish yourself in some activity or some academic initiative, right? Overperform, learn the discipline of keeping your word and working hard, and then keep your eye on the ball. I don't think it's what you do. I think it's how you do it.
And how would that advice change if you were speaking to a young professional?
Well, young professional, that's a different question. So young professional, theoretically, I'm talking to a young professional who's already established herself in some way as doing things well. For them, I would say triple your work in the community, double your work as a volunteer in the campaign. Get busy doing stuff in the community that makes a difference to kind of broaden your outlook. One of the other problems we have today is that everyone has a context, and that context and their decisions are based on that context of where they live and how they drive to work and who they talk to. So if you're a young professional and you want to represent your community, then you need to broaden that context, because you'll never accurately understand the lives of other individuals if you don't.
That makes sense. And this might be a bit of a difficult question, but if you can boil your entire public service career down to one life lesson, the most important lesson that you've learned along the way, what would that be?
Work harder than anyone else, always.
And the last part of the podcast is rapid fire questions. What book do you recommend?
Well, I'm not sure. I read a lot of biographies. I'm reading one now that I like, which is The Life of King, about Martin Luther King. King as an individual, King as an advocate for principle. So I think it's a good. I'd recommend that book.
What is your biggest regret?
Well, my biggest regret is losing for governor, I guess. I don't know. Well, that's my biggest professional regret. I've had some personal regrets I won't tell you about, but that's my largest professional regret.
What is a quote that you live by?
So, I don't know which one I live by, but I talk to when I teach a course on innovation in government, and the one I used when I was hiring people to work in government it's a little long, and I'll just summarize it. It's from Machiavelli, of all people, because I probably shouldn't quote in effort to be inspiring. But this quote was, "A reformer has enemies in all those who profit by the old order, and only lukewarm defenders in all those who would profit by the new order." Right? So if you want to go into government but to innovate, you need to remember that the people who are going to be against change are really against it, and the people who will be for change are pretty lukewarm. That's my favorite quote about governance.
That's nice. And then, do you have a favorite quote just about life as a whole, regardless of governors?
No, that's one quote. A podcast is enough.
And the last question, and you might have touched on this before in the question that I asked a couple seconds ago, but what has been the key to your success?
Well, I've been reasonably obsessed with what I want to do next each time, and very impatient about the status quo, willing really in everything I've done to work harder, but also to have kind of a clear idea about why I wanted to accomplish what I was looking to do. So I think it's a combination of clarity about your own personal goals and willingness to work hard to get there, and maybe an ability to attract the people who you need as friends and allies to accomplish that goal.
That's wonderful. Thank you again, Mayor, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, to interview you. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch. Thank you for listening to 30 Years in 30 Minutes. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments if there's anyone else you want to hear from.